afternoon, good evening, everybody. Wow, what a pleasure to be here at Ellen Road. As a long-suffering Leeds United fan, it's nice to visit this place. Fairly confident that I won't be leaving with a sense of disappointment and shame. But hey, let's see how the speech goes first, shall we? And of course, we're in the Billy Bremner suite, where I'm a season ticket holder, and a true giant of the game. Someone who I admired growing up, as he both played and managed Leeds, and they enjoyed some of the most successful period in the club's history. And in many ways, I see parallels between Leeds United Football Club and the British automotive industry. Both are sleeping giants. Both have had successful years over their history, but both are struggling to reach those heady heights once more. Both still believe that the glory days of yesteryear can be repeated and that the best is yet to come. Today, I'm going to talk about that path. The path that I believe the British auto industry needs to take once again to become an automotive superpower. So, a quick introduction. I'm Andy Palmer. I've more than 4 decades experience in the auto industry, including serving as Chief Operating Officer at Nissan, where I was credited with pioneering the first mass electric vehicle, the Nissan Leaf, and as Chief Executive at Aston Martin, where hopefully I did lead the company to its first profits pretty much ever, and introduced the first SUV and the mid-engine hypercar, and of course set it on its way to its electrification journey. Today, as the introduction said, I'm Executive Vice Chairman and CEO of Switch Mobility, a carbon-neutral electric bus and van company created during lockdown, headquartered in Yorkshire, and recently valued at $1.6 billion. In addition, I also serve on the boards of various businesses, all operating in the net zero transportation space, including Innobat Auto, a European battery manufacturer, Hilo, an electric scooter business, and PodPoint, the EV charging network. So, how does the UK regain its place at the top of the automotive pack? And how did we end up losing that top spot? I truly believe that what happens over the coming months and years will indeed shape an entire generation of the automotive sector. In fact, right now is perhaps the most exciting time in the industry since the horse gave way to the cart. The move towards electric vehicles, and indeed towards net zero carbon, is reshaping and disrupting the industry at lightning pace. The scale of change over the past 2 years has led to new players entering and dominating the field, something that hasn't happened in many decades, and new expectations being set by the consumer. If we get it right, the opportunity for UK PLC is limitless, and Britain can regain some of those losses in the league tables of automotive countries. But if we get it wrong, and our domestic industry risks being decimated to the point of no return. But there are a few factors that we need to address to make sure we maximise these opportunities and mitigate that huge risk. The first is to adapt a multi-technology approach to vehicle manufacturing. I fear that the industry is, with the guidance of the policymakers, taking a myopic and narrow approach and putting all of our eggs in one glove box. Let me explain. Electric is great, clearly, and it will be the mode of choice for most consumers over the coming decade. In fact, the transition to electric is as inevitable as death and tax. But to surely and truly advance the net zero agenda and to recapture chunks of the market that we've previously lost, the UK must empower scientists and engineers to find multiple green technologies that satisfy the environmental demands of the modern customer. Having spent more than 4 decades in the auto industry, I've seen my fair share of well-intended political meddling, and it has a negative impact. Take diesel as the most high-profile example. In the early 2000s, the UK government provided incentives to motorists to purchase diesel cars. Why? Because they use less fuel than a petrol engine. It was believed that diesels were an environmentally friendly alternative. Less than a decade later, and that proved to be the opposite, with diesels producing several more times nitrogen dioxide and particulates than petrol cars, irritating your lungs and causing breathing difficulties. At the crux of the diesel saga, we found politicians overstepping their mark. Instead of identifying the problem, writing the checks and leaving the rest down to the scientists and engineers, they also dictated faithfully what they believed to be the solution. Today we face a similar problem. Many politicians seem blinkered into believing that electric is the only route for net zero transportation. But that simply isn't true. And as a domestic industry, it's bad business not to have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, and a plan E. For example, while battery technology will play a fundamental role in the industry, it's likely that when it comes to heavy goods vehicles and towing vehicles, perhaps hot hydrogen could outperform EV for efficiency. Synthetic fuels still provide the drama, the noise and the excitement that makes sports cars so special. And there will no doubt be engineers and scientists whose research will see them stumble on applications of environmentally friendly fuels that no one has previously thought possible. In other words, politicians must avoid the temptation to view electric as the one-size-fits-all approach, which it certainly isn't. Herein lies why many car makers didn't sign up to the COP26 initiative. So, we need to keep innovating, keep pushing to find new solutions that can provide a shot in the arm to our domestic auto industry. Then there's another factor to consider, and this one is even more political than the first. In my interactions with governing politicians over the past few years, I've noticed a steadfast and, given the circumstances, somewhat foolish commitment to the free market. Now, let me state that I believe in the free market. I'm a capitalist, I'm a business person. And I want us to operate in a market without needless intervention or needless interference. But I'm afraid to report that we aren't operating in a global free market. The whole net zero segment of the global auto industry is being propped up by state-funded actors. In January 2021, the European Union approved 2.9 billion euros in subsidies for 12 member countries to develop a project aimed at boosting the electric battery industry. This follows a 3.2 billion euro plan to support research and innovation announced in December 2019. Across the pond, Joe Biden has made investing in EVs in the EV sector one of his top policy priorities and is pumping billions of dollars into it. China's EV supremacy is also built on vast investments from the government. 98% of the world's electric buses are in China, and because of their coordinated government investment that shows no sign of drying up, they lead the world. And whilst the UK government is investing in the sector, namely through changing infrastructure and a few hundred millions here and there for gigafactories and electric buses, it's dwarfed by what we see from competing nations overseas. Those who fear disrupting the level playing field need to take their heads out of the sand. As it is, the odds are heavily stacked against us. Put simply, if the United Kingdom does not establish at least 4 gigafactories in the next 5 years, we risk losing our entire auto industry and the 800,000 jobs that go with it. To get there, we need investment. And it won't happen without a mix of public and private sector investment. A failure to act based on the commitment to the free market would be principled, but ultimately terminally reckless. What's more, we don't have long before it's too late. Frustratingly, where there is incentives and investments from government, it isn't always deployed in the right way. In my world of electric buses, the government is stimulating the market by regulating procurement that says we no longer want diesel buses, we want electric buses. Great. On the face of it, that's exactly the kind of intervention that will benefit the industry. However, the zebra funding, as it's called, designed to stimulate the industry, is yet to be released and flowing. So we've ended up in a situation where nobody's buying diesel buses or domestic electric buses. What does it lead to? Effectively, we have a dormant British factory, or 3 of them, and good intentions from the government, but by failing to deploy the funds to back up the impressive headlines, we've ended up with the unintended consequences that are hindering British manufacturers. Without wishing to appear glib, the government has 2 options. Get the targeted intervention right, or, I apologise, but screw up the British auto industry. So, we need investment from politicians, and we need them to define the problem we're trying to solve, but not prescribe the solution. It's then up to our designers, our engineers, our suppliers and the OEMs to develop the technology, the intellectual property and the environmentally friendly solutions. The decisions that we take over the coming years will define the next era of human advancement. Getting the economics of batteries and other net zero fuels right is not something that we can do, it's something that we must do. Today, I find, and I truly believe we find ourselves in the 4th iteration of the Industrial Revolution, a revolution that started through steam power. We would do well to keep in mind that the 5th iteration might very well be powered by our ability to identify and develop net zero modes of transport. Getting there, however, is not a natural process. Just as we had to push the boundaries in the past, so too we have to push our boundaries in the present and in the future. Changing the world takes sweat and hard work. That revolution is already underway. We have to keep going. Why am I so passionate about making sure that this happens? Because transport is an innate part of our culture and our society. Society bends to the innovations in transportation. Roads are adapted to vehicle innovation. 3-lane highways, smart motorways, unfortunately. Autonomous driving, connected cars, shared Uber mobility. These have all evolved around the technology of the cars, buses and bikes that we use every day. Don't expect that to change. The relationship between vehicles and society will evolve at a greater pace than the past, and we have to keep up with it. The final factor that will determine Britain's fate in the automotive manufacturing world is about information and understanding. We live in a world of misinformation, and it's more stark than in description of EV. It's more stark than in the description of EV range and cleanliness. The reputation of EVs are undermined by range anxiety, born out of unreliable expectations. The reputation of EVs will be undermined as the customers discover that not all EVs are born clean, that more CO2 is typically discharged in the construction of an EV than in an internal combustion engine car, that a zero-emission car, in fact, is not net zero. I recently called on Britain to champion the EV equivalent of the Monrovia sticker. The Monrovia sticker was originated in America and goes back to the early 60s. Congress introduced the label in the window of each new car, showing the suggested retail price of the vehicle and installed accessories. I believe that we need something similar for EVs, a label that discloses the real-world range of the vehicle in urban, highway and multi-terrain conditions, both in hot and cold climates. It also would have to describe the total carbon expended in the production of the vehicle and during its operation, using either sustainable energy or conventional energy. Finally, it would highlight the local content used in production. An EV isn't particularly environmentally friendly if it's shipped halfway around the world or manufactured using a global supply chain reliant on air freight. More transparency will lead to furthering of confidence in new energy solutions, and of course it puts pressures on manufacturers to improve their offer and give Britain an advantage over international competitors who choose to cut corners when it comes to quality in favour of quantity. Not only that, it gives Britain an advantage by favouring local production, because local production doesn't require long and thus carbon-intensive supply chains. A consumer or legislative pull based on publicly disclosed information has the potential to balance local production of EVs with local demand, an equation that today is massively out of balance. In 2021, for every internal combustion engine car registered in the UK, we manufactured over 7 internal combustion cars ourselves, even though some of them were exported. However, for every 10 battery electric cars registered in the UK, we manufactured less than 4. We're exporting our jobs. Put another way, we're unknowingly exporting our jobs to the EU, the US, Korea, Japan and China, rather than using the Green Revolution to create jobs in the UK and build on our proud heritage as an automotive manufacturing powerhouse. Give the consumer the information to buy, inform them of the local content used in the vehicle, and highlight their true impact on the environment. Now, I know I need to wrap up, and it's been a real pleasure to speak to you today. Yes, I've pointed out some of the key challenges that we face to get Britain's automotive industry roaring again. But please don't misinterpret that as doubting the industry's ability to make it happen. There is a real sense of excitement about the period that we're in right now in this automotive sector. Between us, we have the ability to put Britain at the forefront once more. Whatever the circumstances in which we operate, the British auto industry has a proud history of changing and adapting itself, moulding itself around the demands of government and the expectations of consumers, but always on its own terms. And that's why it's such a vibrant and exciting place to be a part of, even if perhaps the same can't quite be said of Leeds United. The future is exciting. It really can be bright. We just need to go out there and attack it and return Britain to the pinnacle of global automotive industry once more. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.